Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. We're broadcasting from the UN Climate Summit in Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt. Talks are expected to go into overtime on the last official day of the COP27 climate conference here in Sharm el-Sheikh, as delegates seek a compromise on an agreement over the issue of loss and damage and how to slow down global emissions to combat the climate catastrophe. Activists condemned an early draft agreement which failed to call for the phase-down of all fossil fuels. On Thursday, the European Union agreed to a new loss and damage fund to compensate poor nations for the impacts of the climate crisis, but key actors, including the United States, have thus far objected to such a fund. In an 11th-hour appeal to climate delegates, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres called on Thursday for nations to overcome a breakdown in trust between rich and poor and stand together to prevent the worst effects of the climate crisis.
This is no time for finger-pointing. The blame game is a recipe for mutually assured destruction. I'm here to appeal to all parties to rise to this moment and to the greatest challenge that humanity is facing.
We'll have more on the UN Climate Summit here in Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt, later in the broadcast. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi says she will not seek a leadership role in the next Congress after 2 decades spent leading House Democrats. Pelosi spoke from the House floor Thursday after midterm election results showed Republicans have won a narrow majority in the House of Representatives.
I will not seek re-election to Democratic leadership in the next Congress. For me, the hour's come for a new generation to lead the Democratic caucus that I so deeply respect. And I'm grateful that so many are ready and willing to shoulder this awesome responsibility.
In California, Democratic Congressmember Katie Porter has been reelected to represent the 47th House District in Orange County after a narrow win. Porter is a former UC Irvine law professor known for her tough questioning of witnesses during hearings of the House Oversight and Natural Resource Committees, questioning, for example, the heads of Wells Fargo and Bank of America, as well as J.P. Morgan Chase. In Colorado, the race between far-right Republican Congressmember Lauren Boebert and Democratic challenger Adam Frisch appears to be headed for a recount after initial tally showed Boebert's lead at just over 500 votes out of 327,000 counted. Boebert is a far-right Trump supporter, an election denier, and infamously vowed to carry her Glock pistol on the Capitol grounds. Last year, Republican leader Kevin McCarthy refused to sanction Boebert after she used racist language to attack her Muslim colleagues. Ukraine's government says 10 million people have been left without electricity after dozens of Russian aerial attacks targeted Ukraine's civilian infrastructure. On Thursday, the first snow of the season fell on Kyiv and other parts of Ukraine. In Russia, U.S. political prisoner, women's basketball star Brittany Griner has been moved to a penal colony hundreds of miles southeast of Moscow. Earlier today, Russia's deputy foreign minister said he hopes to negotiate a prisoner swap with the U.S. that would include convicted arms trafficker Viktor Bout, known as the Merchant of Death. Meanwhile, jailed Russian opposition leader Alexei Navalny said Thursday he's been permanently transferred to a cramped solitary confinement cell in a notorious penal colony east of Moscow and will be largely cut off from the outside world. The Biden administration's petitioning a U.S. court to grant Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman sovereign immunity in a civil case seeking legal accountability for his involvement in the 2018 murder of journalist Jamal Khashoggi. The U.S. State Department argued bin Salman's new role as Saudi Arabia's prime minister means that he's, quote, the sitting head of government and accordingly immune. Biden vowed as a presidential candidate to make Saudi Arabia a pariah for the state-sponsored killing of Khashoggi, who is a Washington Post columnist. But since taking office, Biden has refused to condemn bin Salman for ordering Khashoggi's killing and dismemberment. in the Gaza Strip. At least 21 people were killed and others injured on Thursday after a fire tore through an apartment complex in the crowded Jabalia refugee camp. In response to a request from the Palestinian Authority, Israeli officials said they would lift Gaza's normal travel restrictions to allow survivors to seek medical treatment in Israel. The FIFA World Cup soccer tournament opens in Qatar Sunday as human rights advocates condemn serious labor and human rights abuses against migrant workers who built stadiums and other infrastructure in preparation for Qatar to host one of the most anticipated international sports tournaments. Rights groups report thousands of migrant workers from countries including India, Pakistan, Nepal, Bangladesh, and Sri Lanka have died in the dozen years since Qatar won the right to host this year's World Cup. Qatar has also deported migrant workers who've denounced wage theft. In New York City, part-time faculty members at the new school have gone on an indefinite strike to demand a fair union contract. Adjuncts say they haven't received a pay raise since 2018, and that administrators' offer of a 3.5% wage increase falls short of keeping pace with record inflation. Meanwhile, nearly 50,000 student workers at all 10 University of California campuses are on the 5th day of an open-ended strike. The workers are demanding child care subsidies, better health care for dependents, lower tuition for international scholars, and are asking for their compensation to be tied to housing costs. In more labor news, thousands of Starbucks workers at over 100 stores nationwide walked off the job yesterday over the company's refusal to bargain in good faith with newly unionized workers. Starbucks workers in New York joined the day of action dubbed the Red Cup Rebellion.
Starbucks claims to be a progressive company, but they drive us to the bone every single day. Our health care is unaffordable for many of us. We have serious health and safety issues in our store.
We are on strike because we are fighting for better scheduling, fair wages, and the failure to bargain from Starbucks. They have not decided to bargain with the unions, which is an illegal activity. They've been stalling. They've been doing their best to avoid us.
Hundreds of Twitter workers resigned Thursday after rejecting new owner Elon Musk's one-day ultimatum to go, quote, extremely hardcore or leave within 3 months with 3 months severance pay. Twitter has closed its doors until Monday as it figures out which former workers it now needs to cut access for. And amidst rumors, Musk is worried about internal sabotage at the company. Musk reportedly met with some workers in hopes of convincing them to stay. The hashtag RIP Twitter began trending on Twitter. On Thursday night, a light projection on Twitter's San Francisco headquarters trolled Elon Musk with the words bankruptcy baby, apartheid profiteer, and space Karen, among other insults. Alabama prison officials called off the execution of Kenneth Eugene Smith Thursday after they struggled to establish an IV line for his lethal injection. Alabama canceled another execution in September for the same reason. This comes after an execution team in Arizona struggled Wednesday with the killing of a prisoner for the third time this year. 76-year-old Murray Hooper had always maintained his innocence after being convicted of murder and sentenced to death in 1983 without any DNA evidence, but was repeatedly denied DNA testing. After failing to insert an IV into Hooper's arm, his executioners used a vein near his groin. Hooper reportedly turned to witnesses and said, "Can you believe this?" And Stratton Lynn, the longtime peace and civil rights activist, lawyer, author, and people's historian, has died at the age of 92. In the early 1960s, Stratton Lynn taught alongside his friend Howard Zinn at Spelman College in Atlanta and served as director of the SNCC Freedom Schools of Mississippi. He was a leading early critic of the Vietnam War. The State Department stripped him of his passport after he traveled to North Vietnam in 1965. Stratton Lynn was a conscientious objector during the Korean War, later supported U.S. soldiers who refused to fight in Iraq. He appeared on Democracy Now! In 2006.
The logic of those precedents is that a soldier in Iraq, or like Lieutenant Aaron Watada, under orders to be deployed to Iraq, can say, I consider this to be a war crime. Even if my superiors tell me something different, I am obliged to use my own judgment, my own conscience, and so I say no.
And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman.